They say the quietest betrayals are the loudest, because nobody hears them coming until the silence finally shatters. My name is Amara. I'm 34, and for 11 years I wore loyalty like armor. To my job, to my husband, to the family bookstore I'd helped my parents build from a single rented shelf into a neighborhood anchor. I believed in keeping promises the way other people breathe. So when the betrayal came, it came like frost. Slow, shifting, and then suddenly everywhere. It started with small disappearances. A box of new releases that never made it to the display. Petty returns that never registered in inventory. A few cash discrepancies the manager blamed on clerical error. I thought it was fatigue. I thought maybe the new point-of-sale system was glitching. When you own a business with people you love, you forgive mistakes because you assume the motive is human, not malicious. I was wrong. One rainy Tuesday, a courier dropped off a stack of invoices addressed to an address I didn't recognize. The vendor names were familiar, the same printers and suppliers we'd used for years, but the bills were routed through a shell company with a smiling logo I'd never seen before. I remember standing under the awning with that envelope in my hand, rain dotting my glasses, feeling my chest go simultaneously icy and hot. I opened the invoice there right then, and the handwriting at the bottom, my signature. My signature. Signed on a date when I'd been at a story reading with kids at the library, in front of 50 witnesses, with my phone buzzing in my bag like a harmless insect. I went to the staff immediately. Polite questions, casual tone. No one admitted anything. Then I went home and checked the cameras. That's when the pattern became a line. My husband, Daniel, the man who'd fallen in love with me over late-night discussions about Toni Morrison and coffee foam, had been in the back office at odd hours. He had a key. He'd been the one signing vouchers, routing payments, diverting small amounts into that shell company. The sums were not enormous, nothing to be noticed in a single month, but the rhythm of them made a steady siphon. Betrayal by a stranger cuts you. Betrayal by someone who folds your laundry and knows how you take your tea hollows you out. I didn't shout. I packed a bag and slept at my sister's house, listening to the quiet that used to be mine and realizing how loud it sounded now. I could have gone public with anger, called him a thief at the next community meeting, smashed plates in the storefront window like some theatrical justice. But whatever released my fury also had to repair the things people depended on. The cashier who lived paycheck to paycheck, the part-time student who shelved in exchange for coffee, the elderly customers who came for conversation. I decided very simply that revenge would not be spectacle. It would be exacting and responsible, a repair performed with surgical care. First step, evidence. I needed more than a trembling camera clip and a signature I could be accused of forging. I hired Mira, a private investigator I'd met at a neighborhood association meeting, a woman who smelled of peppermint gum and logic and who kept files like gardens, neat, labeled, alive. Mira found that the shell company was a slice of a larger pattern. Small local businesses with the same vendor names were receiving similar phantoms of invoices. She traced routing through a mailbox service 2 neighborhoods away and found that the company had been set up the same month Daniel had volunteered to help straighten the bookkeeping. Second step, allies. I told my parents an abridged truth, not the brutal details that would shatter them, but enough they could understand my caution. They hated the idea of Daniel, but they loved the bookstore more. Marta, our manager of 12 years, squeezed my hand and said, "Then we start a proper count tomorrow." The students I'd hired, shy, resourceful, began to ask for overtime to help with audits, and somehow their eager hands turned the work into a communal thing, not a private vendetta. Third step, leverage. Daniel was not a criminal mastermind. He was an afraid man who had rationed his courage into secrecy. He'd folded small betrayals into a narrative of necessity. "We needed extra cash for the renovation," he'd said when I finally confronted him, voice slippery with denial. He expected sympathy. He misread me. I didn't want jail for him. I wanted restitution and the safety of everyone he'd touched with his quiet theft. So I prepared 2 parallel tracks. One legal, one social. The legal track would involve a formal audit and, if the evidence demanded, criminal referral. The social track would protect livelihoods, temporary payroll reserves, advance notices to key suppliers, and a careful plan to communicate with customers in a way that preserved trust. The action had to be timed. If you reveal too early, people will dismiss it as domestic drama. If you reveal too late, the money vanishes and the pain calcifies. I set the reveal for a Saturday morning staff meeting, a time when everyone could be present and when the mess could be addressed as a team rather than a spectacle. I wanted transparency to look like care, not brutality. The day of the meeting, the bookstore smelled like freshly brewed cardamom tea and dusted pages. People drifted in, part-timers, volunteers, a retiree who ran a crossword circle. I stood at the front with a folder. My hands were steadier than my heart. Marta read the inventory sheet aloud while I handed out copies of invoices and the tracing documents that Mira had compiled. I told the team exactly what we found and exactly what I planned to do. I explained that Daniel had been diverting funds and that we would be launching a formal audit and that anyone who felt unsafe could take paid leave. I told them I would be personally covering payroll for the next month from an emergency reserve the business had. Money I had always insisted we keep for slow seasons. A silence folded over the room, not of accusation but of shock. Daniel arrived in the middle of the meeting, breathless, as if he'd been summoned by the bookstore itself. He looked at the invoices, his face moving from confusion to red to a kind of raw pleading. "Amara, let me explain," he started. "There's context." He tried the scripts of excuse, the suites of manipulation he'd practiced during difficult conversations. He thought he could rewrite the ledger with words. He was wrong. Mira had done her job. The mailbox service records, the bank trails, the signature matches. The proof was gentle and relentless like tide. No theatrics, no shouting, just pages cold and honest. We gave Daniel the option to cooperate with the audit and to agree to a restitution plan, or to face referral. He chose both. He cooperated because he had nowhere credible to run, and the restitution included him working in the back for the next 6 months, unpaid, and returning every rupee he could. I insisted on counseling for him as part of the plan. Theft is often a symptom of other fractures, and accountability without help is cruelty. But the story doesn't end with paperwork. The real work was in repair. I made sure the employees who might have lost hours were paid. I personally negotiated with a supplier to delay one large invoice. I started a small fund for staff emergencies and put a non-profit oversight panel in place to ensure transparency. Revenge, in that mode, became a form of stewardship. I reclaimed what was mine while protecting the people who had nothing to do with the crime. There was also tenderness that surprised me. My sister came every evening to help with late counts. She brought tea and stories and lemons, because that's what family does when a marriage cracks. They offer citrus and time. A young intern named Sam began shelving with a new quiet pride, as if helping heal the store made him more himself. Strangers left notes and small envelopes of donated cash with messages like, "For the staff, keep the light." The community did something I'd forgot cities could do. It rewired grief into care. Daniel apologized in 1,000 small ways. He learned slowly to be small without being diminished, to do work that made him embarrassed and proud at the same time. He sat through counseling sessions and cried, sometimes at things that had nothing to do with me. I forgave him, not because betrayal is forgivable but because the person who hurt me was also a person I had once loved enough to know how he was built. Forgiveness in my case was not reconciliation. It was a refusal to be consumed by hate. Years later, the bookstore is still on the corner, roots deep. We installed a transparent ledger online for public view, a radical act of trust that people could watch where money moved. We started a small community safety class to teach independent business owners how to spot subtle fraud and how to protect employees without paranoia. I teach it on Tuesday nights. Afterwards, we eat dal and talk about small mercies. People come and say, "You saved our job," and I always answer the same: "We saved our work together." If revenge had a prayer, mine was this: that truth would be used not as a weapon but as medicine. I had wanted a reckoning that built more than it broke. Maybe that's not the sexy version of payback, but it's the one that keeps a street full of shops humming. So if you ever find yourself facing a quiet betrayal, watch, document, protect, and repair. Be precise, be brave, and remember that the loudest revenge is sometimes the one that rebuilds what was almost lost.